Exceptional Radio.
So, we've been away since like May. I was actually looking at the previous entry date for all this stuff, and man, it's been a while. Some crazy shit's happened over the past few months, like since May. Seriously, like it's almost like we're in a different world. And I know
Right.
we've said things like that in the past, but the landscape has changed significantly just in 6 months. And it's not even sure what to make of it sometimes. Like I've been largely away from paying attention to news and media. I've been essentially in the trenches of the last mile of food delivery, food pantry delivery. Now that's like, homebound people, people who don't have vehicles, people who are just disabled. They're unable to get out. They're unable to make it to the pantry, and so the pantry delivers like 50 pounds of food sometimes to various locations all over the surrounding area, and this is all free. Well, kind of free. It's free to the people who are patrons of the pantry, and most of it is because this is the pantry that I was working for was a private entity. It was all like donations and grants, and basically, as it was described to me, as begging for resources. And it was a really wild experience because at first it's like, yeah, helping people, but then it's like, what is this really? What part of it is that me feeling some kind of weird savior complex, and what part of it is actually like really making a big difference? And I want to temper this with, like, I think there was one month that we delivered like 200, or it was a week. No, yeah, it was like a week. We delivered like to 200 different locations, and they served 1,000 people that week. And I remember asking the directors, is that kind of like a regular kind of statistic. 20% of the deliveries, 20% of deliveries reflects the total number of, or no, the 20% of the total number is reflected in deliveries. And they said, yeah, that's kind of how it is. And it seemed to me that's like, it seems like at first it's like that sounds like a lot of effort. There's got to be like a better way to do this, but there really isn't. And they would set up like mobile pantries and like deliver to areas that were within the kind of delivery area, but to simplify distribution of food and resources. And this is all on like the most shoestring of shoestring budgets. Like not even maybe I'm not sure what's less than shoestring. Like the free twine that you get to tie your stuff together at Menards. Uh, it's pretty rough because all of the employees were like kind of stressed out because no one's getting a living wage. There's no budget to maintain equipment. Everything's at the behest of like a willing donor or some local shop who's like, yeah, we'll do it. But that just seems like a poor model to function. Always resource starved, always asking for handouts.
I mean, I think that's assuming that the goal is to function and not create vulnerable people. You know what I mean? I think there's a loaded assumption operating in America that things are meant to function because at one point there were like lifetime guarantees on your appliances and you didn't have to like worry about getting salmonella or E. coli from food at the grocery store. But that was such a brief window. And the only reason that window happened was because government regulation was like working the way it was meant to be working. And I think people gave the market those wins. And so I think it's like, on the one hand, there has been a time in American capitalism where things did work the way they, if you buy something, like if you ordered a pizza, if it wasn't there in 30 minutes, you get it for free. That window, it only lasted for such a small, brief period that it's like, in everybody's mind, I think that's what defines capitalism. And in that period, there were more useful technological advances in that technological advance does not equate to societal advance. And I think that's the lie that tech bros have sold to make themselves seem more relevant. But society just kind of accepted it as like gospel. And especially now that we see it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so just on the note of tech bros, if one does a search for food pantry statistics from Google, you'll get USDA and a lot of the top level organization that deal with getting food to food banks and then further to food pantries and then to the last mile. But if you do a search on Google Scholar, all of the top results until you filter for stuff just from 2025 is like 2019 and older. And any of the new stuff has, mentions AI. Like AI is the solution to this now. It's really surreal to me to like that kind of leap. Like there's the best results from Google Scholar are old, at least 5 years old. I think that's kind of a reflection of how much attention this stuff actually gets, but also on a different, also wild note, I was really surprised at the kind of food that was available at the pantry. Like, they were giving out cases of Kobani yogurt, like little cups of yogurt. And I didn't know that Disney had pineapples, but Disney pineapples are the most delicious pineapples that I've ever had. And I was able to try a black diamond watermelon, which is a very dark green skinned watermelon with like the reddest of red interiors, and it was delicious. And I'm not complaining, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't be allowed to have good food. Those are just examples. The amount of just seafood that was thrown away because nobody would pick it up out of the coolers was it kind of made me sad. But what it actually told me was that we live in a society with a system of supply chain that's so robust that they can make Greek yogurt at such quantities to keep a steady, fresh supply that there's enough that has to be disposed of. Essentially, the big
I mean, but part of that is, I mean, not part of it. The main part of that is the subsidies.
yeah
So this is where again, the subsidies go towards the food on the front end. They subsidize the farmers, they subsidize the companies, and then the food goes out on the shelves, and then it sits, and then gets taken to the pantries after it's air quote expired.
yeah
And so it's the
disposed or
same
distributed.
food, but it's also like, yeah, this cycle is not, it's not meant to be efficient. And so
Oh
it's like the supply chain, it creates enough food for 10 billion people every year, but then three food for 3 billion people gets thrown away. And
yeah.
so it's like there's no way that,
So out of that 200
you know,
deliveries in a week, I might have been responsible for 80, maybe 100, 80 to 100, probably not 100, probably like high 90s on the big end. And a lot of that, the rest of the distribution was reliant on volunteer work. In fact, there were only a handful of actual employees at this place. Almost everyone else was a volunteer, and so that's another thing. Like, there's food, it's got to be distributed or disposed of. Like all of the produce ended up on a pile that didn't get taken. It was ended up on a pile out back, reserved for like pigs. He's like, give it to the farmers; they'll feed it to their pigs. At least it's not going into a dumpster. Some of it still ended up in a dumpster. And the other thing that kind of was like crazy was the number of pastries that showed up at the pantry. Like some of them were just messed up in transit. Like you could probably still eat it. I'm sure you could eat it if you were hungry and really wanted a cake. But that's one of those things that I didn't expect to see. Like I guess it never occurred to me what happens to pastries after they've been sitting for so long that they don't get sold and they don't get sold. But I also had a
well,
steady
again,
stream of
it's like
croissants, so
the issue, this is the issue we had at Starbucks when I worked there as an undergrad. They'd have the stuff at the end of the day, and it wouldn't even be able to go to the pantries because it was fresh, so it would have to go to pigs, and they wouldn't be able to give it to homeless people. So it's like, because of these rules, there are these gaps in our supply chain where it's like, yeah, you have pastries from every coffee shop that don't get sold all get given to pigs because there's a law saying that it can't be given to humans. Well, at least in Indiana. And that's where, I don't know if those laws apply everywhere, but it's also, these things, they create these gaps and quandaries for people to fall into when it's like they could just give out the food. And this is where I'm like, on the one hand, yeah, the supply chain has plenty, but it's not because capitalism has been efficient or of an inherent efficiency anywhere. It's more so
no, they
the
maintain.
safety nets are
Yeah,
what keep everything moving.
exactly.
But even then, it's like at the top, there's so much waste that it ends up making the safety nets look like it makes it look like the safety nets are abuse when it's in reality the abuse is coming on the other side on the shelves.
Well, it was crazy to me. Like how many during the egg crisis when eggs were like $9 for a dozen, they were just giving out dozens of eggs. And I remember I delivered to one place, and these contractors were building a staircase stoop, and this one guy just is like, "Look at that! They're just giving away eggs." And I didn't think about it because I'm not really big on eggs. Like a dozen eggs will sit in my refrigerator for a month. And
That's how all Americans are, which is why the whole egg rush was ridiculous in the first place. Like people were just so easily manipulated that the same shit happened with toilet paper and eggs. But I know Americans, their taste buds are shot, and they don't eat eggs like that. So it's like this whole thing was like, it wasn't about the eggs. It was about capitalism running out of things to pump and dump. And so this was like the egg market getting pumped and dumped. In the process, Americans like showing that they're so easily manipulated that they'll like rush out and buy eggs at inflated prices.
well, it was crazy because I remember, like, the scare of the bird flu and the effect on poultry markets during that was like 3 years ago, and there was a I guess it was an effort by the federal government to do something about it, but they didn't do anything about it, and just there was a scare of avian flu for like 3 years, and then there was the egg drought, which came out of nowhere, but not really, because I'm not even sure why I was paying attention to avian flu, but for whatever reason is on my radar. And then it happens, and my initial reaction is like, they've had 3 years to do or 2 years to do something about this, and no one's done a damn thing about it. But when I think about the past 6 months, and it's like, yeah, there was no egg shortage, at least not in Indiana. The prices didn't.
No, there was never an egg shortage. It was all just
It was just
a lie.
Yeah.
There was just like there was never actually a toilet paper shortage. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the way they had to start making people only buy one package of toilet paper at a time because they were going in, and then the fucking hand sanitizer, and that dude was like flipping like capitalism is so cooked, man. It's like whenever the people at Electronic Arts and Nike got caught taking their own shit and flipping it on the secondhand market, that's when everybody should have been like, hey, what are we doing here? But no, they're like, okay, let's pump another thing. And now AI is this fucking circle jerk of investment and lies about functioning technology. And like the Google results have only gotten worse, and then it's suggesting AI for everything as if AI can go in and solve the problems with the fucking supply chain.
Well,
like, no, that's not gonna happen.
I mean, even feeding America, which sits at the top of the last mile distribution, they're going to integrate AI into their program too. They're all doing it. Everyone's thinks AI is the solution.
I mean, they're gonna do it for like 6 months, and then they're just gonna take it out. It's what's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen. They're not integrating. They're experimenting, and the experiment's gonna fail, and then they're gonna take it out. That's what literally happens with 97% of all of these AI projects, and the only other 3 to 5% and 2% margin of error that are working is because it's actually like quantitative statistics of some sort in their process. And that's really the only thing any of this stuff is good for. And at that, it's not even great because it still hallucinates. So this is where I'm saying, like, all of the AI experiments have failed. And then in the process, they've gone so horribly wrong that it embarrasses any company that implements them. So it's like, yeah, what is somebody at a food bank gonna do with fucking AI in the you know what I'm saying? Like there's ways that they're saying, oh, it's gonna make um uh your Excel spreadsheet tracking more efficient, and then you go in and it fucks it up somewhere down the line, and then they have to have a human figure out how to undo it, and then they stop using the AI. That's how that shit happens. So this is where
I'm surprised that the news about Gemini detecting Claude being used by Chinese state hackers to expose confidential information didn't get more attention, but it didn't. Got like almost zero attention. that to me just is the perfect example of how AI isn't going to help anybody. It helps people who want to help themselves. I don't know. It's there's so much of this that to me that like it just feels like there's all this effort on the ground and there's no, even if there are notes, nobody's going back through them and putting them into the system so that other people can see it. And I just don't believe from any of the stuff that I've read that the people who are doing any of this research are actually putting any kind of real sweat equity into, are they going into these places and spending months moving shit around and delivering to people and setting food out and basically running a supermarket, a small supermarket, like, but not because
No,
everyone.
they weren't doing that before AI came around, let alone
How the hell is
now
AI
they're
going to do
saying
any of that shit?
exactly.
How's how yeah, how is AI supposed to send a robot out into the sticks to deliver to somebody in a trailer on the end of a really rutted out road that they can't, that most vehicles will barely make it down?
Right? And how's that shit supposed to work when the internet barely fucking works?
Yeah, what drone is going to carry 50 pounds of goods out into the middle of nowhere?
Well, and
Some of
that's
these
like,
places don't have. Some of the places I delivered to did not have cell service, like
I
zero
don't
cell
know if
coverage.
you ever went to any parties at Roy Waterford's house, but it's like GPS did not work there, bro. Like
No, I
if
remember
if
that place.
GPS doesn't work, you think fucking Chat GPT is gonna work out there? Like, no, your cell phone did not work.
Oh, I
Your
remember. I
GPS
remember.
did not work.
I remember I met you out there one time, and it was like I got like most of the way there, and then then my signal just cut out, and I just, it was one of those, okay, Tian, you've lived in this part of the world most of your life. Just rely on your knowledge of the back roads, and just look for signs. And then when I didn't see a sign for like 10 minutes, I just used the old raver technique of turn the motor off and stick your head out and listen, and then I found it.
Well, and that's kind of where when you go out to that place, then you see the sky without light pollution,
Yeah.
and then you're like, holy shit. Like, okay, this there is a benefit to not being on the grid, but when you need to be on the grid because you've become so dependent on it, the trade-offs are like they're real. And I think that's where, some people are they have ways that they can fall back on not using those same dependencies, and that yeah, we had to print out directions and use maps before GPS. So we know how to navigate still, even if we don't even have directions necessarily to the place. But that also took a lot of trial and error, which is where we had the benefit of cheap gas
Yeah.
to allow for that trial and error. So it's like if you can't afford to buy an extra couple tanks of gas while you're driving around, you got like one shot to either find the place or then you're like, okay, I can't keep doing this and I have to go home. And I think that's where then that prospect prevents a lot of people from going out in the first place. So there's a lot of things stacked against socializing in modern times, but I don't think it's like there's certain ways that people socialize in real life that were only really possible when gas was cheap. And I think that's kind of the shit that people are holding on to in their minds, but it's not really possible to do those kinds of things anymore. Like people need to carpool and designated drive if it's going to be car based, or they need to have public transportation functioning, which is not really, that's a big ask in America
Yeah.
in 2025.
I mean, even like I I remember road trips. I had Rand McNally road atlases like for every state. I had maps, like detailed maps of regions, and I loved that stuff. And eventually, MapQuest became the standard, and that was at first I thought, oh, this is great. Now I don't have to look up the route myself. I don't have to figure it out. But I think that also that experience was beneficial, like you were saying. It's a and it's a perishable skill in the sense that if you don't do it a lot, then it becomes like this thing you have to think about. And on the note of of gas prices, you're absolutely right. There was a time when I wouldn't even hesitate to just hop in the car and just drive somewhere. And it was like I had like a 6 hour radius of like I'll drive up to 6 hours before I'll like consider turning back kind of thing, and not even think about it. And now that's like a quarterly type of thing that I plan for.
Yeah, and like on that note, I remember I used to go back and forth between Indianapolis and Bloomington on the weekends.
Yeah,
Like it was no big deal, and then I wouldn't even have I would leave with a quarter tank of gas and like not be worried about. I think a quarter tank would get me to Bloomington and almost all the way back because it was before all the construction made it impossible to get there, and it would be like a 45-minute drive.
yeah.
And so it wasn't, it didn't take like a full tank of gas to go there and back. But even then, it's like the traffic was just not bad enough to make it seem like that was a big deal. Whereas now, before I moved to Detroit, I would hate going to Indianapolis because you just get stuck in traffic for so long that it's like it may take 90 minutes, it may take 2.5 hours. You just don't know what the trip between Bloomington and Indiana or Indianapolis was going to be.
Yeah,
It was so unpredictable.
you're absolutely right. I was just thinking about it. There was a solid decade where a quarter tank of gas would get me from like the center of Bloomington to the center of Indianapolis, and with enough gas to spare, and then go home, and not be out of gas by the time I was home. And I don't really, I'm not sure if how much the construction has really changed. No, the construction definitely changed things, but I think a lot of it really is just that the more it costs to go somewhere, the less there is to do once you get there, and then those limiting factors ultimately define like the success of any kind of adventure. Plus, getting older, you realize that going out with no real plan is bullshit and it's not fun at all.
Well, there's only so many times you can go out and drink and not feel like a loser and like everybody's looking at each other knowing that it's sad but trying to pretend that it's not sad, and then they drink more to put that feeling off. And the older one gets, the sadder that whole thing gets. And I think with raving especially, the shit with drugs would make it's so unsustainable for people because you can't keep partying till like 5 a.m. and doing cocaine or Molly or whatever those people were doing and then go out and do it again next week.
Yeah, can't.
It's just you can't do that shit. And you can do it as a teenager, and sometimes into the early 20s it can not work, but people can sustain it. But it's unsustainable any further. But that doesn't stop people from trying to keep doing it and looking fucking really sad in the process.
I think that no, I think on the note of like adult drug abuse, you're right, man. Like it is sad to see like people who just they can't not drink. It's and people who need to be medicated, and it's not necessarily because like they're still doing it. It's that there's something fundamentally wrong with our, like, you know, our healthcare system or our society, where we still allow these things to be accepted solutions. There are plenty of people out there who are like just, you know, eating pills to manage their emotional state because for whatever reason their environment is so stressful that they can't. And we've all know somebody who's like been on the pharmacological route and watched people like that just deteriorate slowly. Some takes a long time. Some people seem to manage really well because they're actually following the recommended administration. But that's just like to me it feels like that's the solution for people whose support network has failed them. And I acknowledge that there are also people who are, you know, like are not, that their neurochemistry isn't stable, or that they've got a lot of other stressors, or they might suffer from like PTSD or CPTSD, or, you know, there could be any number of reasons, but not for fully functioning people.
Well, but this gets back to what I was saying about American society actively tries to destroy any connections for people with disabilities or for fully functioning people, in that um, I was explaining this to one of my friends who's not American, and I was like saying it in a way where, like, when you say it out loud, it feels almost like anti-American in a way, because it's such an egregious framing where you're like, nah, there's no way Americans are this anti-family and anti-social support networks. And I was explaining to him, I'm like, you know, it's so common for people to, you know, white kids to be like, I want to emancipate from my parents and I'm going to divorce my parents and I'm going to take your money, but I want my freedom and shit like that. And I'm like saying it, and like, you know, it sounds extreme, but then we go watch Mythic Quest, and the next fucking episode, the main character, like one of the main children characters, is like, I want to get emancipated from you parents. And like, that was literally the plot, where I'm like, that shit is so common that it's like, it's what you do in season 4 when your fucking TV show has gotten stale. That's where it's that common. And so that's where I'm like, it shouldn't have been, we have that conversation and then we watch a TV show and it's literally the next goddamn subject. That's not the way shit should, it's not supposed to work that way in real life. That's supposed to be the way it works in TV shows. And so when I'm like, oh, this American society has gotten so fucking unoriginal and so predictable and so anti-family that like, it was in a show that we were enjoying, in that there once again it comes to the point, like, in American media, basically you hate everyone. There's no affable people in American media, and in a way we've just become so used to it that it's like, oh, if you want to watch something new, it's like, okay, how many people of the main cast do I hate their characters? And then it's like, if it's not above 50%, then you can like keep going with the show. But usually it's above 50%, to the point something like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's like 100% of the characters, but that's part of the charm, air quote, of the show. And so when we've gotten to a period where all of the air quote protagonists in our media are unlikable people who are not good at what they do generally, they cheat their way through their industries, they always try to take shortcuts, they look for ways to be likable, but only when it serves their best interest. All these things are so perpetual that we've gotten so used to them that like when you see media that's not like that, it's like, wow, this is awesome. But it's just like clearing the lowest bars in American media that have been dragged down so low over the last 30 years that people go back to shit from the 80s and 90s and like, oh, it's, this is the times when the media was the best. And it's like, you still have to overlook a lot of shit to say that about those because they use the F word a lot for no fucking reason. Like, and I don't mean fuck. And that's where I'm like, the F word is so, you're like watching like a kid's show and they drop you, whoa, shit, like this was on Fox, what the fuck? And it's like, no, I'm not exaggerating. Those are the types of things where to then claim that that's the best area of media, you have to then absolve it of those lines that it used to cross for no reason, except for the fact that it was a common trope. And so this is where like looking at the point of media illiteracy that America has come to in tandem with the bad media, in tandem with the xenophobia that keeps Americans from looking at things outside, this bubble that has been created that is less than 5% of the global population. Let me repeat. It's less than 5% of the global population that consistently conflates its state and existence with the world. The way Americans use the world and America interchangeably needs to be studied because the population is so small. Like this baked in narcissism is so grandiose, but so pervasive that it's easy to get wrapped up in the American decline and the American tailspin as if it's the entire world. But if you actually look at the rest of the rest of the world's going the other direction. But this is also why when you're in America, there's such an attempt to make the propaganda seem like our state is the world state.
So I was curious, like, because I know that the population just went over 8 billion. Currently, the United States represents somewhere between 4.12 and 4.2% of the global population. That's not that much. It's like
right until somebody points it out, it's super easy to forget because of our media and our language, and our, not to say that the cultural influence is not there, because the cultural influence is definitely there, but it's not as pervasive as it used to be, and it's not as good as it used to be. So we're pushing out a lot of cultural slop and people are rejecting it, which is where, like, if you go to Europe and beyond Europe, there's like an entirely different set of musical taste. It crosses over with America, but then you see where the most successful American artists go over there and make completely different music for there, to the point I remember when I was in Turkey, I heard a Lil Wayne song. It was like a house song. Never ever heard that shit in America, which is where I'm not to say, or it's not to say that Lil Wayne has not faltered and become less relevant, but at his height, him and fucking Pitbull were making completely, and David Guetta, or however you say his name, that they're making completely different sets of music. Like Usher made a song with David Guetta, and like I don't know if that shit ever came out in America. Because that's the only reason I even knew of David in the first place. And then he made that fucking George Floyd tribute, and then people in America really were like, who the fuck is this guy? And it was at that point he fell off because he also tried to do an AI Eminem voice, and it was absolute shit. But he was so into it that people were like, yeah, I'm not listening to this guy anymore. Which I'm sure he's still fine in Europe, or I'm assuming, but people gave him a chance in America, and then he got too he like, there's a certain type of Europeanness that if you cross like a boundary, that shit becomes real corny real quick. In Europe or America, but I think it's easier for them to get away with it in America and make it seem like they're just eccentric Europeans. Whereas, like, if they would go pull that shit somewhere in Europe, they would get clowned just like they would or like they should. So there's benefits of distance for cultural influence that people have been taking advantage of in the past. That now the internet has sort of broken down those barriers, but created new channels for influence. Now you get the like Jake Pauls and the Mr. Beasts, and now you got kids in Turkey buying Feastables, but like they don't know about the mold shit. Like the Feastables make it, but the news about the mold doesn't make it. So there's things where you see like our propaganda is pushed out and they're trying to make American shit desirable, but that's also on the tail ends of, especially if stuff has failed in America. Now that's the shit that they're pushing out instead of like what would have been successes in the past, like McDonald's or something. In that, I think in the past, if you saw McDonald's in a place, that was a sign of a multicultural crossover that wasn't necessarily high culture, but it was progressive. But that, I don't think American presence really indicates that anymore. And I feel like it stopped indicating that in like 2006. But people hadn't caught on to it quite yet, especially Americans.
I thought that like my initial reaction to Mr. Beast's show was, this is clearly not for me, and so I just don't really pay attention to it. But this is disgusting. Like I like cheese enough that I'll eat cheese, but I don't really. I'm not into like Limburger or stuff that has visible like mold on it. Like I can do like a blue cheese dressing on a salad when it's an industrial product, but this stuff just looks horrible.
And it's overpriced.
What's scary though is that like the cheese looks like blue cheese, but the pepperoni looks like untouched. So part of me wonders, were they actually using good stuff and the cheese just molded because it was actual cheese and it just wasn't prepared, processed properly into the package?
Yeah, but you can't use that type of stuff and shit that's gonna sit on a shelf.
No, you can't. Absolutely,
which
not.
Is like
there's like the
a decision that might be made by some dumbass kid that became a millionaire.
Yeah, well,
being a dumbass kid.
It's like the whole fresh pet food market. That stuff has like a very limited shelf life because it's cooked, packed, and then put into a chiller, and then it has to be there until it's opened up basically, and then that's like a couple days, maybe a week worth of animal food. But even then, that stuff can't sit on the shelves. Once it hits its expiration date, poof, it appears at a food bank or at a food pantry.
Right, and in full circle, that's why this shit can't go directly to humans in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Because, like, it may look fine on the surface, but it may be hiding mold in every package.
one of the things that the inventory manager told me was that they didn't ever take the meat home with them that came into the pantry because there was no way to tell if it had gone through a thaw-freeze-thaw cycle before, or how many times, or if it sat in the back of a truck for X amount of hours. Like, there's just no way to tell.
Right, and that's, those are risks that when you don't have to take those risks, you shouldn't take those risks. No. But then there's so many Americans that are put in a situation where they have no choice. And in the process, you're like, okay, at least they have a safety net. But then you look at the actual supply chain, starting with the subsidies, and you're like, okay, this didn't have to be this way. They could have had some dignity in the food that they were getting, and not have to take these handouts and in the process take a gamble as if the handout, like, yeah, it may have Chobani label on it, but it may be full of fucking mold behind that label. And so it's also like, especially when COVID hit and we were like going to the food pantry just because resources were scarce. And it was like, you have to take advantage of all of the opportunities and like nets that you have. It's like, when you don't really have a choice, it's not worth complaining about the food. And it's not really something that people should be necessarily complaining about. But then it's like, yeah, America as a government and as a society putting its own citizens in the position where they have to accept that food without the capacity to take it with dignity, and then also in the process potentially get sick and risk getting sick just because. That's where I'm like, there is a sickness in this society that it's been festering for hundreds of years that we know of, since these fucking lunatic religious psychos split out from the British government in the first place. But it's these religious fanatics that want people to suffer. That's at the core of all of this stuff. They want people to have to like beg for just basic human needs that in reality a government that exists should be making. It should be constantly elevating the basic level of existence for its citizens without having to demand that those citizens work like slaves. And so knowing that all this exploitation bullshit that's being funneled into exploitative subsidies was born off the backs of slaves and Chinese immigrants and Irish immigrants that like were all exploited too, to varying degrees. I can't in any realm of discussion accept that this is the peak of any system. This is like the cesspool of economics. This is the cesspool of politics. This is the cesspool of how people treat the lowest of their national brethren. This is the cesspool of how people treat their families. Everything about this country is the pit. And a silver lining, it really can only go up from here. It could, you know, in the sense of, yeah, in theory, it could always get worse. It can always get worse. And so I think that's where people are like, in that pessimism and in that framing, they're not wrong. But I think in America, there is too much visibility from the outside. And then in the process, our self-destruction drags down too many other countries for people to like not step in at some point and pull the plug on the American experiment in a way that like it may not look like a traditional undermining or unraveling, but in the same way that the right wing now is unraveling, I think the American experiment has already started to unravel. But it's just a matter of like, unfortunately, corporatocracy is what's emerging here, but that's not what is emerging globally as a paradigm. And in the process, the rest of the world is no longer building itself off the American dollar and the American stock that is a bunch of hot air.
Wasn't there like a big anti-corporatocracy protest like a decade ago?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
like the Occupy movement, weren't they like really? They were pushing
Oh
to get
yeah,
money out of
yeah, yeah.
politics, and they were trying to like bring attention. Man,
But then it got co-opted by the CIA in
got
America.
co-opted by the CIA, and I don't think anybody actually knew what they wanted. It wasn't like clear, and then here we are a decade later, and the corporate state is fully emerged, and now they've got AIs telling everyone what to do.
Well, and that's like AI, if it really did what they're claiming, they wouldn't have to fucking shove it in every part of the fucking internet without people's consent. And that's where there was a point where they started trying to basically give it away, and it was clear that they did not have a real application for any of it. And it's funny to me that the same issues that crypto was having and the blockchain was having in terms of us being a solution looking for a problem, AI has this same issue. But what I also then realized with do you remember in the 90s when Swiss Army knives were getting popular?
Oh yeah, I carry a Swiss Army
Now,
knife all the time, but it's because of MacGyver
now
and also my Boy Scout training.
the Swiss Army knife, there is the paragon of those, which is something actually made from that company, the Swiss company,
Oh yeah,
and
Victorinox.
it's like everything else was a knockoff.
Yeah,
And so in addition, anybody who ever bought one eventually probably got a Leatherman if they needed to use it, but in the process they also learned there is an upper limit to how many tools on one multi-tool as to where it stops being useful for any of the tools. And it's between 5 and 7 really.
yeah.
Like, and then they had, they had these 100 tools on one Swiss Army knife, and at that point it's basically like as wide as anybody's palm.
Yeah, no.
Not going to be able to use it as a knife.
One
You're
of
not going
my
to be able to hold it as a knife.
one of my buddies
The
has one of
leverage is
those
off.
things. He has the it's a showpiece. It's to demonstrate all
Exactly.
the tools. You're not actually supposed to carry them. Like the classic Swiss Army knife, the Tinkerer, or the Hiker. Those things have. Let's see, the Tinkerer has 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 tools, and I think the one that I have, the classic MacGyver one, I think it's a 7 tool Swiss Army knife.
But even then, the tweezers always suck in those.
Oh yeah, no.
The tweezers are never usable functionally.
Nope.
The pick always sucks.
Pick always gets
So
lost.
it's like,
I have both of those,
yeah,
but only because I never use them, and that's the only reason they still exist in my Swiss Army
because
knife.
they're unusable.
Yeah.
That's why you still have them. So
Yeah.
it's like,
No, it's true.
everybody knows that once they've acquired these things. So in that context, it's like, yeah, multi tools. Anybody who's ever used them knows there's an upper limit, and in that framing, AI will never be useful in any individual aspect. The more tools that they try to make it become.
Yeah.
And so this is where, to me, those things are obvious, but I think now it's becoming more apparent, or it's becoming more difficult to occlude and to hide those things by the companies, and they've overpromised so far that the only things for them to be able to deliver being a shitty Coke commercial and scams, I don't think anybody is really impressed. And, oh yeah, that's right. And it's made boomers even dumber.
so,
If
so I had a year and some change ago, year and a half ago, me and a buddy of mine, we loaded up Python and a bunch of tensors and a large language model and cobbled together a stable diffusion system, and we were able to generate countless images, and got good enough that we were able to make it work for us. But here we are a year and a half later, and it's so much easier just to go to the internet and find a generative AI that'll create images based upon a prompt, and it's so much better at it now than it was a year and a half ago. And they're still giving it away for free.
But even then,
and the only reason
here's the issue.
I built that thing is because I didn't want to, buy tokens. But now you don't even have to buy tokens.
But here's the issue. As good as it has become, it's still not as good as asking a person to do it, in that there's going to be something that it doesn't get right, because I've seen the pictures that people use and there's always something that is wrong, like tonally wrong or color wrong, or like the actions are wrong, something. And even if it fixes those things, it still would have been cheaper to go to a human, because on the individual side, yeah, the token cost is negligible, but you can't run individual queries without deconstructing or by deconstructing the large language model, and by proxy, you still need that entire large language model to function to be able to do that. But then guess what? In 3 to 5 years, all those chips are going to be fucking
completely cooked.
Useless. not cooked. They're going to be useless. Like, they're not going to be fast enough to keep up with the changes and the algorithms and the models that will have happened in 3 to 5 years. So they're going to have to change the fucking chips. And then they're going to have to do all the... That's not sustainable. No. So this is what I'm saying. Like,
it was never sustainable.
It was like what they're pitching not only was not sustainable, but it was built on a gap that could never have been closed.
Oh my! Speaking of gaps, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, or I've read someone write in a thread, well, what if AI could? And all that does is inform me that they haven't figured out that these are recursive neural networks that are just functioning on a recursive algorithm, and that it's designed to, emulate with a high probability of acceptance. Sorry, 80% of the time it renders something that 50% of the viewers will accept. And that's like good enough to fool people. But it's still just this, it's still a lie. Everyone's been sold the science fiction AI, and really what we've got is like super advanced or super complicated Google search engines, basically.
Right, but it's also like, yeah, it's easy to convince people who are media illiterate. That's the issue. It's not that it's good, it's that the people are dumb.
That's what I mean.
And the bar has been lowered so far that, like you're saying, it's not what was promised in the science fiction, but then you find out a lot of people haven't even fucking watched Terminator. So they don't even fucking know the cautionary tale of Terminator. So you're like, yeah, of course these people aren't going to understand how to like fight back against AI because they didn't watch it. They didn't even bother to watch the cautionary tales. Because then you look at like Matrix was about AI. That shit was literally about when humans started congratulating themselves for their accomplishments after AI got produced, and then the robotics, like,
yeah, the robot uprising. Because humans kept treating him like slaves.
Yeah, it was AI first. Yeah. It was not robotics first. It was AI first. And it's like, it's easy to forget because the Sentinels are the main antagonists that we see. And it's robotics that we're watching, but it's actually a super intelligence that is distributed over robotics, which is why Deus Ex, like the Deus Ex in the end is like easy to misunderstand what's happening because it's swarming, but it's like it's just using that swarm to intimidate. It's not really, it doesn't exist in those things. It's distributed. So like even the way that people did not understand that part of the Wi-Fi aspect of Neo and him evolving as like part human and part machine and being able to like transmit without wires, that was the evolution of their species. But people weren't even like, they refused to accept that Neo wasn't human, down to like the way people rejected the architect's speech, the way that Neo rejected the architect's speech. it's so it never ceases to like be funny to me as somebody who appreciates the Matrix, but like Neo's reaction, yeah, humans reacted that same way, and they still will not accept that Neo was never human. They just won't accept it because they want to be that human that can like download shit to
But
their
it's,
brain.
yeah, well, he's the one that downloads into humans. It's not the
Right.
other way around.
No, exactly. But again, it's like it's so narcissistic to want him to be human and like to then not be able to accept that he never was.
Yeah. Well, it's very cleverly nested. You know, like this is the seventh. This was the seventh time they've they're going to destroy Zion. That means that there have been several predecessors versions of the software of the one that's designed to destabilize this. And they tell you the whole thing. The Oracle explains it. Then the architect explains it again in a whole separate movie. Like.
And in the video game.
And in the video game, and in the cartoon anthology, and in the fourth movie, they really tried to beat the point in the fourth movie.
Well, and it hits so much harder now. Like, I loved it when it first came out, but it hits even harder now that a bunch of people have exposed themselves to be bots. And like that's why they hated it when it came out the first time, obviously. But it's like, no, you're really bots. Like you're about to crash out over some dudes you don't even know. Like fucking all these people who crash out over Manosphere guys or the president. Like, man, y'all are some real bots for real.